I'm going to be watching all of X-Men 97 in one sitting today. I've heard great things about the series so far, but I've purposely been not watching any of the episodes and been waiting until it's all out so I can fully binge all 10 episodes. And now that the series is out, it's time to lock in. I'm a huge Spider-Man fan, I'm a huge Marvel, huge superhero fan in general, but ironically enough, I don't know a whole lot about the X-Men, even though I know they have some of the best media in Marvel in general. I watched the movies in the early 2000s and the horrible ones that came after, and they're okay. Logan's great, the other ones are just alright. But I really don't know a whole lot about the X-Men, even though I boast about being a huge superhero and Marvel fan. So I'm going to be going into the series completely blind about a whole lot of the X-Men lore, and I haven't watched all of the original X-Men animated series, so I'm going to be going into the series fresh, brand new mind. Not a huge X-Men fan, even though I know they're great, so I'm hoping this series turns me into an X-Men fan, and I don't really know a whole lot about the previous established lore that this series is going to be based off of, so let's just see what this series is about. I've heard great things, but I've got 10 episodes to go, so let's just get into it.
X-Men. Too hot to handle. Me, my X-Men.
That was phenomenal. After episode 1, I totally understand the hype and why people have been glazing this show. It wasn't a perfect episode, but it was a really great episode, and it set up the floor for what's to come next. We have our introductions to all of our main characters, and each character, their dialogue, you can see how different they are from each other, and it doesn't feel like anything is being forced upon you. It feels like a very natural progression of things, where you see Scott is obviously the main character in this series so far, at least. He's struggling whether he should leave or not because Jean Grey is pregnant, and all this stuff. All the characters have their personality traits and powers, obviously, that define them, and it doesn't feel like it's being forced together to accept all these different characters. It's just kind of like this is a family. This is a group of friends that's now a family. And they have their differences, but they're living together and they have this common goal. Even if you're not akin to the X-Men or Marvel lore, even the end credits that I'm looking at right now I'm looking at Jubilee's powers. It shows in the end credits, it shows all of our main characters and what their powers are. That way, even though throughout the episode there was subtle hints to what each character does, it just straight up shows you in the credits, hey, this is the character, this is what they do. That way, you're not guessing when you go into episode 2 or what's to come about these characters. Another thing I want to say is the theme, the art style, everything about this show, the way it visually and audibly looks and sounds is awesome. I was literally thinking to myself while watching just episode 1, obviously this isn't my favorite show ever, but the type of person I am, I love an ensemble cast, I love superheroes, I love just weird sci-fi stuff. If episode 1, even though it was just setting everything up, if it keeps the same pace and the same quality of storytelling as it progresses through the other episodes, this could be my favorite TV show. And I don't watch a whole lot of TV, but this could be up there with a lot of my other favorite TV shows. I get the hype. This was awesome. I'm hooked. Let's just go to episode 2.
Jean.
So episode 2 kept the same pace and the same quality as episode 1, so I think we're on a good trend here. Episode 2 was very interesting. It started with Magneto saving humans and then turning himself into the UN, basically saying, put me on trial for all these horrible crimes that probably took place in the original X-Men series that I didn't see. Put me on trial for this. I'm going to turn myself in. I'm going to prove that I'm innocent so you guys can trust me, and then we can move forward. And this whole time I was very weary of Magneto because obviously he's a villain. And I and many others were thinking, okay, what's the play here? But it seems to be that Magneto was being genuine. I still don't believe it, but it seemed to be that he was being genuine. So then some anti-mutant guy comes in with some friends. They start shooting up the trial. Long story short, he shoots this depowering ray right at Magneto. Storm jumps right in front of him and gets depowered herself. And then Magneto freaks out, takes everyone in the room, the board of the UN leaders and the guy that shot Storm, takes them up to the atmosphere, basically tells them, I can kill you guys, I'm gonna kill you guys, but I'm not gonna do that. I'm actually a good guy. I'm not gonna kill you guys. But I could, but I'm not going to. And then he lets them go, and then the next day on the news, Genosha, which is the X-Men country where all the mutants flee to, is now part of the UN. They're like, you know what? This guy doesn't mess around. Genosha's part of the UN. And then the episode ends when everyone's back at the X-Mansion, thanking Magneto the fact that the Genosha is now part of the UN, and everyone's starting to believe. Even Scott, he gives Magneto coffee, and it seems like everything's going to be okay. And then it's revealed that Storm lost all of her powers in that blast, and she didn't just get depowered for a little bit. She got depowered, Beast says, indefinitely. So Storm feels like she's unwelcome because she's not like able to be in the presence of other mutants when she's not a mutant herself. So she flees. So then at the end of the episode, Jean Grey knocks on the door of the X Mansion and falls in the lap of Murph, and it's revealed that there's now 2 Jean Greys. I don't know who is who. Really good cliffhanger, but all that you need to know is that Scott and Jean had a child, the original Jean from the episode 1. So I don't know which one's which, if this is Mystique doing anything, I don't know, but pretty good so far. Pretty good second episode.
We're in hell.
Don't.
Episode 3 was tricky. It picks up right where episode 2 left off with with one of the Jean Greys coming into the X Mansion. And it's revealed through Beast that the Jean Grey that showed up is the real Jean Grey, and the one that we've seen in episodes 1 and 2 is in fact a clone of the original Jean Grey, and this makes everyone start freaking out. It's revealed that Mr. Sinister is behind all of this cloning, and Mr. Sinister is the father of the clone Jean Grey, and the reason he's wanting to clone Jean Grey is so he can take Nathan, the baby between Scott and the clone of Jean, and give him superpowers or turn him into a mutant or whatever. It's not really fully explained. He just kidnaps that Jean and that baby and then takes them and puts the baby Nathan into this like vat container. Highlights from this episode: we see an evil Magneto and an evil Jean Grey have a power fight with like telekinesis versus magnetic abilities, and that's pretty cool. We see Inferno Jean, which is the clone of Jean. We see her give everyone like their own version of like a hellish nightmare come to life inside the X Mansion that they all have to work through at the beginning of the episode. We see Scott powering up Bishop, and Bishop says something along the lines of like, "Burn in hell, all you demons." I see takes the power up and kills all the demons. Just some fun action bits. The original Jean Grey is essentially in a coma because she can't deal with the fact that she hears all the voices because she lost her memory due to the fact of being cloned, so she's having to learn to overcome her original struggles with her powers. And when she awakes, you see a little hint of a love triangle between Scott, Wolverine, and Jean, which I'm sure will develop down throughout the rest of the episodes because that's a constant thing throughout the comics. The regular Jean awakes, and as clone Jean is off at Mr. Sinister's mansion, essentially mind controlling and just beating up on all the X-Men. The original Jean just wakes up, puts her mind inside of the clone Jean, and says like, "Hey, this isn't what we're about. You're under the control of Mr. Sinister." Basically snaps the clone Jean out of her like hellish nightmare of being evil and just whooping up on all the X-Men, and they both realize that like, yeah, we have a son to raise now. Let's just go and kill or fight Mr. Sinister. And this episode was okay. There's a lot of development going on, and it ends with Storm sitting at a bar in Texas, and some guy comes up to her saying that he can help her get her powers back, which I'm sure will happen, but I wonder what that guy's ulterior motives is. Last thing that happens in this episode is it's revealed that baby Nathan, after being put in the like tube from Mr. Sinister, he's got some sort of like mutant virus on him, but they don't have anything in their lifetime to be able to cure him. So Bishop decides to take baby Nathan and go into the future in hopes of bringing him back with a cure because he's going into the future. But that's where the episode ends, so I'm excited to see where episode 4 takes us.
I am Storm, mistress of the elements.
Episode 4 was weird. It's structured into 2 halves. Where in the first half, Jubilee and Roberto touch this off-brand Nintendo console and they get sucked into a video game. And I was hyped for this. I thought this was going to be awesome. The animation was really, really cool. It starts off with them in this like Street Fighter retro arcade 8-bit styled game where they have to literally just punch their way through to go to new levels. And it reminded me of the old, this might be a niche reference that no one else is going to remember, but it reminded me of the old Scooby-Doo movie where they all got sucked into like the cyberspace, I believe, and they were traveling around the internet. That's what that reminded me of. And I thought this was going to be a really cool episode, but the first half really was just filler. The first half ends with Jubilee meeting the future version of Jubilee, gives herself like a Peter Pan pep talk. Wow, say that 3 times fast. Peter Pan pep talk, where she says it's okay to grow up and you don't have to be young forever, and the future's unknown, but so is the present, sort of. I don't know. It kind of felt like a meta excuse for why Jubilee's always been a young girl, like a teenage girl. But they defeat the bad guy through in the video game, and this might show up in the next episodes. I don't really know, but they defeat the bad guy, and then Roberto and Jubilee get sucked back into the real world, and then she kisses him. And that was half 1 of the episode, and the second half was, it felt like filler again. Storm goes to, I believe he's Native American, the guy, I don't remember his name, but the guy that was at the end of the last episode at the bar. He cooks her dinner and admits that he has a crush on her and is going to help her get her powers back, and puts her in this machine to try and like revive her powers. That doesn't really work, and then Storm gets upset and asks like, why are you trying to help me anyways? He explains how he wasn't the one who made the weapon and the gun that the guy shot that got her to lose her powers, but was behind the making of the weapon, so he's partially involved and he feels bad. And then out of nowhere, this like demonic owl creature comes in, kills the Native American guy. Again, if that's not his actual race, I apologize, but kills the Native American guy and then kidnaps Storm and says something about how I'm going to eat you, and then it cuts to black. So besides the ending where Storm gets kidnapped and almost killed, this felt like a filler episode, which... why are we doing filler episodes if there's only 10 episodes in this series? I don't know. Not a huge fan of episode 4, but hopefully it gets better.
It's just like he said it'd be.
A new age begins.
Episode 5 was insane. Spoiler, it ends with, like, just now, Gambit sacrifices himself for everyone on Genosha, and at the end, Rogue's like holding his body and weeping over him and says, "Sugar, I can't feel you," as it cuts to black. Gambit's dead. That's... wow. There's a lot that happened in episode 5. It starts off with the X-Men at the X-Mansion getting interviewed for this like news story that's covering Genosha being uttered into the UN, and so they're interviewing the main people of the mutants, like the X-Men. And as they're being interviewed, the interviewer asks Scott if he has a kid, and he denies it, and then she pulls out the receipts, and she's like, "No, you have a kid. This is like the receipts from the hospital." And he runs off and gets all pissed off, and Jean, the real Jean, comes up to him and is asking him why he's so upset, or is going to ask him why he's so upset that they're bringing up his kid. But when Jean shows up, she realizes that clone Jean, who's on the other side of the world on the island of Genosha, is like having an affair with Scott, like telepathically. They're like making out and stuff. So the real Jean gets pissed off and interrupts it because she can like feel it, right? Because they're clones. They have this like weird psyche thing. She can feel it. She gets pissed off, and so her and Scott are arguing. And she's like, "Do you not love me? Like I'm the real one. Do you not love me?" And he has to kind of explain to her like, she gave, like, the clone of you gave me a kid. I was with her for so long. I love both of you. And of course that's not the right answer for this version of Jean, the real one. So she gets pissed off. And then we find out that the clone version of Jean is part of like the interim council of authorities or whatever, like the House of Representatives essentially on Genosha. And then we switch back to Genosha and we see Nightcrawler. He shows up. He's, I don't want to say the MVP of this episode, but he's a standout for sure. We see all these new mutants that are on Genosha, these like little characters, and then Nightcrawler shows up and he's a fan favorite, so it's always good seeing him. I love his energy. A few big takeaways from episode 5, which is like right in the middle of the season, is when they get to Genosha, Gambit questions why they have a statue of Magneto, and all of a sudden all these mutants now trust him, which speaks to me thinking like, yeah, Magneto is not gonna be a hero in this. Like I think he's playing the long game, trying to earn the trust of everyone for some greater alternative motive that he has. Turns out Magneto made a deal with the UN that he'll become like the leader, like the king of Genosha, as long as an X-Men is the queen. That way you can have like an authority figure that is good, like the X-Men, with Magneto, who's like kind of neutral, even though he's mainly bad, and he chooses, of course, Rogue to be his queen. And that's, if she's not his queen, then Magneto can't be the king of Genosha, which means they can't be part of the UN, as I'm pretty sure how that works. Rogue tells Gambit, like, hey, some things are more than emotional, and Gambit explains to her that, like, things are more than physical, and she just reiterates to Gambit, like, I love you and we're compatible mentally, but we can't do things physically. But I can do things physically with Magneto because he has, like, electromagnetic powers that, like, cancel out her powers when they touch. And so it seems as if she's going to become the queen, but then right at the very end of the episode, she tells Magneto, like, yeah, this isn't worth it, essentially. Like, I'm not going to be your queen. And then right when that happens, a bunch of Godzilla Sentinels is what they're called, like, spawn in and start nuking Genosha, and it's so weird. And then right at the very, like, end of the episode, Cable shows up. And I know Cable from the Deadpool 2 movie, but I'm not, like, a huge like I said, I'm not a huge X-Men Cable. I don't know the whole lore. I'm not a huge fan of all of that. I mean, I'm liking what I'm seeing, but I don't really know the backstory, right? But it's explained that Cable comes in and he meets the clone Jean and calls her mom and then disappears. So I'm guessing that's Nathan from the future is going to be Cable. I'm guessing that's how it's going to work out. Don't really know if that's how it always works out, but that's, I'm guessing, what we're going to get now. But I'm hooked. This was a great mid-season finale. We got 5 more episodes to go. A lot better than episode 4, so I'm excited to see where this goes.
Hear me. Class is now in session.
After episode 5 being amazing, episode 6 is extremely boring and is a lot of filler. The episode starts off with Charles Xavier being alive and well with like the Kree out in the middle of space in some Imperium, which is cool. It's awesome, but what does this have to do with present day? Unless I just missed it, it's not really explained what happened to Charles, and who knows, there's like 3 or 4 more episodes left, so it might explain what happened, but he just kind of showed up out of nowhere, and he was like, hey, I'm back, and then the rest of this episode really just felt like filler. We cut back then to Storm being tortured by like the owl demon that took her a few episodes back, and then literally what I can only describe as like the power of friendship and self-will. She tells the demon like, actually now I have my powers back, I'm going to overcome you psychologically, and Storm gets her powers back. It's alright. Turns out the Native American guy, whatever his name is from a few episodes ago, he's alive still, and Storm's like nursing him back to health. I'm not really interested in this like subplot with him and Storm. I guess they're lovers now, but this episode is kind of boring. The episode ends with Charles Xavier like going to get his memories washed away, because the whole reason he's with this Imperium for some reason, like what's going on with that, is if he renounces his memories and like wipes his slate clean, he will become like the heir to this empire and the Imperium and stuff, which it's just all really boring in my opinion. But he says like, oh, I'll renounce my feelings of my past and the friends on Earth or whatever, and then they're like, will you renounce my X-Men, or like your X-Men? And he like pauses and then says like, no, there's one person I can't forget, and that's Magnus, talking about Magneto. And it sounds a little gay to me. I'm just kidding, but like also I'm not. He's like, I will not forget my one friend. Then he puts everyone in this like psychological like school classroom thing, and while like class is in session is what he's saying, he gets like a vision of Gambit dying from one of the Sentinels, and he's like, oh my gosh, I have to go back to Earth now. I must not cower down, and I must fight with my own kind, or something like that. And it just has me thinking like, where has bro been this entire time? Like obviously he's been here, but like what happened? It just seems like, I don't know the character of Charles Xavier a whole lot, but it seems almost like character assassination, in my opinion. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like he's just cowering away with this like off-world Imperium for some reason. Hopefully it explains why, but this episode 6 and 4, they were sluggish to get through. So I'm gonna crack open another one. Got episode 7, 8, 9, and 10 left. Hopefully they're better.
Nothing.
Same sugar.
In the midst of It's So Over, we're so back. Episode 7 was great. It starts off with a funeral led by Nightcrawler for Gambit. It's a really touching moment, really sets the ambiance, sets the mood for what we're about to get into. Throughout this episode, Rogue's on a personal mission to find Trask, the guy who's responsible for all the Sentinels and all the reasons why Gambit and Magneto are dead. And so along the way, she runs into Captain America, and there's this fun sequence where he says that he's not going to go help invade Mexico, which is where they believe that Trask is, and he's going to do things by the book, and Rogue says, well, then you're not standing with mutants. She throws his shield, which is kind of funny, and then she goes to find him. And so I thought it was a meta way of saying how Rogue is going rogue from the X-Men, and like from all like the UN and the United States Authority. I thought that was a cool contrast, having Rogue going clash up against Captain America, who's the Star-Spangled Boy Scout. We get a quick little cameo from General Ross, which makes me think that maybe Red Hulk will show up. Then we cut to Scott and Jean, where they basically say how they've got to lock in and lead the X-Men, and they're going to put their like marital or relationship problems aside, and they got to lock in and lead the X-Men because that's what they're there to do. So they go to Genosha. While they're on Genosha cleaning things up, they get a tip from Rogue on where Trask is, so all the X-Men get in their jet and go find Trask. We then cut to Jubilee and Roberto talking to his mom, and Roberto essentially comes out like not as gay, but it's literally treated that way. He comes out to his mom and he's like, hey, just want to let you know, like, I'm a mutant. And she says how she's relieved to hear this because of all these accidents that happened with like solar power, which is his mutant ability. His mom basically tells him like, I'm glad you told us. And he said, you knew this whole time? And she goes, yeah, your father and I decided this wasn't something for us to tell you that we knew. We were waiting for you to come out and tell us. And it was a really sweet moment. I thought it was like meta commentary on people like coming out as like gay or lesbian or whatever to their parents, only for it to instantly switch back into reality. And the mom, since Roberto comes from like a very wealthy family, says, this is awesome, but we got to keep this under wraps because the shareholders, the ones that really matter, the shareholders can't know that you're gay or that you're a mutant. And so then it's cut, and it's this bittersweet moment is instantly turned into a gross and tragic moment with a mother and son. We then cut to Rogue and all the other X-Men seeing Trask about to jump off the building and to end his life because he's upset and he's realized that his Sentinel creations have gone and become worse than he ever imagined, and how Mr. Sinister is about to create an even worse type of Sentinel that will basically be unstoppable. And he goes, and Trask tries to go and jump off a building and die. Rogue catches him and is like, but you can help us fight Mr. Sinister. And he says, I don't really feel like it. And so Rogue says, okay, fine. And then just drops him off the building, and Trask dies. He lands and splatters and dies, and Morph and all the other X-Men are like, is this what we do now? And they're upset, but Wolverine's the only one to defend Rogue, saying like he's the reason why Gambit and all of our other friends and the clone of Jean and Magneto and all these other mutants, they're all dead is because of this guy. He deserves to die. And before they have time to kind of argue the philosophy of it, he wakes up. Trask is this like weird zombie humanoid sentinel cyborg, which is awesome. They have a battle in the streets and he ultimately dies. And then Cyclops is saved by Cable, which ultimately kills Trask. And Cable and Cyclops have this moment where he says like, yeah, I'm your son. We'll talk about it later. Also, I'm pretty sure the clone version of Jean, I don't think she's coming back. I'm like 99% sure she died in Genosha when the like Godzilla's Sentinels like nuked Genosha. So I don't think she's coming back anytime soon. But speaking of clones, the very end of the episode, we see the original Magneto that we've been following throughout the series as a whole with like the long hair and like the beard. We see him getting his beard shaved by what I think is another Magneto because he's using his magnetic powers and everything's like outlined in the yellow that Magneto was doing, except this Magneto looks a lot younger. And he says something at the end of like, don't worry, because he like the Magneto that we know has like duct tape on his mouth, and the new Magneto says like, don't worry, this is what you were made to do. So it makes me think he's either a clone or some sort of something, I don't know, not the real Magneto. So if Mr. Sinister already cloned Jean, he probably cloned Magneto as well. So let's get into episode 8. I'm interested to see where this goes. He's back. The goat's back. Spider-Man from the animated series is back. I knew this going into the series. I knew that he showed up because I was spoiled on Twitter, but he just showed up. He's back. Episode 8 was fantastic. It ends with Magneto being freed, and the whole thing that I just said like 5 minutes ago to you guys in episode 7, that was not Magneto, like a clone of him or whatever. That was the original Magneto. I was wrong. That was Bastion. I was completely wrong, so I take that back. No double Magnetos. Don't hold me to that. But the episode ends with Magneto being freed, and he just EMPs. He EMPs the world. Oh, hello. Do you want to say hi? Say hello, everybody. Okay. So this episode starts off introducing us to the fact that Bastion, he created a whole new species, a whole new race of this like human cyborg sentinels that the Dr. Trask was a few episodes ago. He's got a whole plethora. He's got a whole species. Essentially, the way I interpreted it was everyone in the world, especially the United States, that was like anti-mutants went to this guy, and like sleeper cell got turned into these cyborg mutants. So at literally the flip of a switch, a snap of a finger, Bastion is able to sleeper cell, Winter Soldier style, turn on all of these people as sleeper cell cyborgs. Hello. And since he's the bad guy, his whole reasoning is it takes a mutation to be the mutant or something like that. And all of these cyborg, sleeper cell, sentinels, whatever we want to call them, they have insane powers. All of them seem to have the same power set that just are adaptable to every situation, kind of like in Days of Future Past. The scene that stuck out the most to me in this episode was Nightcrawler and Wolverine were protecting Rogue because she's passed out due to when she got nuked by Trask last episode. She's asleep in the X-Mansion, and all these sentinels come flying in and are trying to attack her. And you see Wolverine and Nightcrawler, they're struggling. Like, they're taking on these sentinels, but they keep coming back. It's not like more keep coming in. It just takes so much just to kill one. We get this really awesome scene of the Summers family with Scott, Cable and Jean. They're flying in the Blackbird or whatever the jet is called, and then they do a Fast and Furious style scene where they hop in a blue Porsche and jump out the back of the plane. It's awesome, but at the end of that, like once they land, there's so many of these Sentinels. It seems like everyone's gonna die. Everyone's put into a corner with like literally like 50 or plus Sentinels attacking each mutant. It's insane. The visuals in this episode, I mean, the visuals in the series are awesome, but the visuals, especially in this episode, are phenomenal. Like I said, the episode ends with all of the mutants being like put into a corner, and then Magneto escapes, or he's let out by like the news reporter girl, and he EMPs the whole world. And from Bastion's standpoint, why are the Sentinels like able to be EMP'd from Magneto? I don't know, for the plot, I guess, but he EMPs literally the whole world. That's when we see the GOAT. That's when we see our Spider-Man. Because he EMPs the world, Wolverine says that now all mutants are at war with the world. So I'm sure that's not going to go well. But at the very, very end of the episode, Charles Xavier comes crashing down to Earth and says, X-Men to me, or my X-Men to me. And now we're gearing up to the last 2 episodes of season 1. I'm loving this. This is awesome. I'm here for it. But I've been sitting for like 4 hours now, and there's only 2 episodes left. So I'm going to go move around. I'm going to go to the gym. I'll be back in a few hours. We're going to crank out the last 2 episodes, and then you'll hear my final thoughts on the series.
Eyes to your future and look down upon this fallen pigsty planet.
All right, back from the gym. Let's check out episode 9, see what it's all about. Episode 9, that was insane. That was awesome. That was awesome. The beginning of the episode sets the tone immediately for what's about to happen. You see Charles just waking up alone in the X mansion, and Magneto's off who knows where, just sitting like by himself. It's setting the tone for what's about to come later on in the episode. With the mix of Magnus getting his full outfit for the first time with the helmet that we see, and Charles wiping off his yellow chair, and the music dwelling, you can tell everyone's locking in. It's about to be for real. One thing that Magneto does great in this series, even from the beginning, is he points out that Charles isn't God. I think to the mutants, they look at him as like their Messiah, like their Jesus or their God, but he's really just a human. Yeah, he made everything for mutant kind, but he can still be wrong. And that's one thing Magnus just runs home with throughout the entirety of this series, and I absolutely love that. We see Scott being pissed off at Charles just because literally what I just said, like, why would you give your legacy to Magneto? Like, he's making wrong decisions, and you see the effects throughout the whole episode of his decision making. Also, Forge, I guess, is a character I didn't know about him. I'm guessing he's a character from the previous series. I didn't know about him, so everything bad I said about Forge, I take back, because I don't know enough about the source material. One thing that stuck out to me about Bastion is, if you look at it from the standpoint of their powers and the effect they're having on the world as a whole, I feel like Bastion, Magnus, and Charles are like the big 3 of mutant kind. Like, Charles he's like a telepath, he can do everything with his mind. Magnus does the same, but with metal, and Bastion does the same as well, but with machines. So it's like the 3 powers are very similar, and the effects they've had, whether it being Charles being the good, Magnus being the gray, and Bastion being the evil, it's just such an interesting contrast between all 3 characters and their power sets. Magneto shows up and just starts recruiting people, again speaking on what I just said about how Charles doesn't have to be right in everything. Like, he is wrong in a lot of his decision making, and Magneto takes that to his advantage and recruits Roberto, who has a new suit by the way, and Rogue. Then we get a really cool montage of everyone suiting up, and Wolverine gets a yellow and red and black suit. Cyclops gets his like full face covering mask, which looks horrible. Let the hair breathe, dude. But it seems like everyone, Jean, Rogue, Storm, it seems like everyone gets their own new outfit, and then Cyclops gives an outfit to Cable, and he hits him with a callback to the original X-Men. He said, what did you expect? Black leather? Again, not a huge X-Men fan, but I thought that was a cool callback. I was thinking about halfway through this episode that there's not going to be a lot of action, and this is just going to be a big build-up to the finale, but man, was I wrong. It felt like everyone in this episode, either because the X-Men split, and so there's like a team Charles and a team Magnus, and it felt like everyone on like the X-Men, like the Charles sides, either has something that affects them really badly, has something that affects someone they love, or they just die. Examples of this is, I'm pretty sure Forge is dead. It at least looked like he was. Looks like Jean died. Wolverine gets his adamantium ripped out of him. Charles almost gets his head crushed by Magneto's helmet. There's a good contrast between Magnus and Charles with Roberto and Jubilee. Magnus and Charles being like the oldest members of like mutant kind and just like the whole face of the X-Men series as a whole. And then you have Roberto and Jubilee being the newer, younger introduced characters, kind of contrasting what is going on, where you can still have these 2 characters, whether it be Roberto and Jubilee or Magnus and Charles, that are connected in their own origin story in a way, but they still think ideologically differently, and there's a big clash between them. I thought seeing that was really, really interesting. But the ending of this felt very Empire Strikes Back-esque, where everyone on the good guys, like the team that we're supposed to root for, Seems like we're all about to lose. Seems like we've lost everything and that there's no hope moving forward. So I'm really interested to see what happens in the finale. But let's just get into episode 10.
I am Phoenix!
Well, it's over. I just finished all of X-Men 97 and that was awesome. Episode 10 starts off with Charles and Magnus stuck in like Magnus's own head sort of thing, where he forgot his memories because of everything that happened with Charles being inside of his head. So Charles is trying to rehabilitate Magnus and to be able to remember who he is. That way they can save themselves because of everything that's going on. And we cut down onto Earth and we see people like Black Panther, Doctor Strange, Daredevil, Iron Man, Captain America, Spider-Man, all these Cloak and Dagger, all these heroes are fighting the like Sentinel cyborg robots and they're not doing too hot. It's not looking good for Earthlings. And then we cut back to Jean Grey and Cyclops and Cable, and in the midst of It's So Over, we're so back. I thought Jean Grey was dead. She comes out full Phoenix Force mode, totally wipes out Mr. Sinister, rips out his DNA and essentially just kills him. But before Jean can get her hands on Bastion rips off Cable's arm, Winter Soldier style, and he like absorbs it and kind of reminded me of like Infinite Ultron from What If, where he just absorbs all of the vibranium and stuff from Vision. So Bastion becomes this huge like cyborg beast with wings, where he's definitely more machine than human now than he's ever been. And then as he's flapping his wings right before he flies off, he says that his plan is to take the like mountain spaceship thing that Magneto and all the X-Men are on and just crash it down to Earth. Kind of like Age of Ultron style, and just extinct the planet. So we cut to the Rock, and it's the power of friendship, essentially. Everyone's just getting their own get back moment. Rogue's super OP, just swinging up on Bastion. It's going great. Everyone's getting their little moment, and then Bastion just becomes super OP, starts whooping up on everyone, and then right when we think it's over, a Sentinel falls on top of Bastion, and Beast, Cyclops, Jean Grey, all these people are inside of it, and essentially, right as Bastion is about to die, Cyclops offers Bastion a chance to join the team with them, and he's considering it, but also is like, nah, I don't want to be associated with you guys. And before he can make a decision, the Magneto Protocol takes full effect, and the USA nukes the ship, blows everything up, and it all starts falling and crashing down onto Earth. And it's not looking good. Forge says we've hit terminal velocity, and we're going to blow up the whole world, and everyone's going to get extinct. In the midst of all of this, Cyclops and Jean Grey like project themselves to Cable, who's down on the ground healing from getting his arm ripped off. And this part got to me. This was like anything with like father and son relations gets to me. But this was such like a bittersweet moment of Cyclops, who throughout the whole series dealt with the fact that he was an orphan and dealt with the fact that he had to send his son into the future, and now his son's come back a full-grown man, and it's just... Man, you see this throughout the whole series, or you see this all throughout season 1, and he's saying goodbye to his son, saying that, like, I'm sorry I was never there for you, and that essentially is admitting he's about to die and is apologizing to his son. Then we switch back to, like, New York City, and we see the animated series Spider-Man that we saw earlier, but he's in his, like, Peter Parker form, and he's with MJ, which means he found MJ, and I'll put a link to it, but I made a pitch video for what the Spider-Man 98 series would look like revived, and we're already there. We're starting. He found MJ, which is great, so... Who knows, maybe I might be right, maybe I might be right. And then when things are looking really bad, you see Nightcrawler doing the Lord's Prayer for Charles and Magneto, someone that has done all this terrible evil to humanity and to the mutant kind, and there's Nightcrawler just sitting there praying for his friends and his enemies, which that got to me as well. I mean, I'd like to think if I was in his shoes, I'd be doing the same, but I don't know, man. That part really stuck out to me. And then we cut back into Magneto's mind with Charles, and he realizes who he is. He goes into full effect and is like, I'm Magneto. And through the power of friendship, they basically put the Phoenix Force, Magneto's Force, Xavier's Force, and grab like the rock that's asteroiding down to the ground, and they shoot it back up into space. And then as soon as it stops, and it just like poofs, it either like... I thought it got like sucked into a black hole or like vaporized, but it skips 6 months into the future, or 6 months later from what happened, and you see Bishop and Forge looking to create a new team of X-Men, and Bishop tells Forge that actually he knows what happened to them. Something happened in time, and all the X-Men got sent in different parts of time, and so that's where season 2 is going to pick up. Right at the very end, we see that Rogue, Nightcrawler, Charles, Magneto, and Beast are in Egypt in the year 3000 BC, so I think this is going to take place like Age of Apocalypse style, and I bet that's where season 2 is going to be. It's just going to deal with the Apocalypse storyline, which is, I wrote down, I take notes while watching, I wrote down in my notes, and then the post-credit scene, if you have your closed captions on, it actually says Apocalypse, says something, so that's obviously where that's going. And then the rest of the team, Cyclops and Jean Grey, are in the year 3960 AD, which means they're in the future, and then the last thing you see is their little son Nathan, who's like 10 years old, and then it just cuts to black. So what did I think overall? I thought this was awesome. I love this. It was awesome. I get the hype that everyone's been saying. This was amazing. I think one thing that stood out to me is this is how great something can be when the people behind the project actually care, not about the source material, but that and their characters and everything they're doing. Even if there was someone on this team, which I'm sure there was, that didn't watch the original X-Men, maybe I didn't know anything about X-Men, but was just an animator, and was like, man, I'm going to put my heart and soul into this because this is like my first gig animating, whatever. You can tell when people put their all into a project, and that's what happened with this. It speaks volumes compared to all of the like slop we've got in the MCU recently. As a whole, I loved everything in this series, from like the writing, the character drama, the script, the music, the animation. All of it looks so good. I know I believe later this year, Spider-Man, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, or Freshman Year, or whatever the name, like the working title is for that, if they keep this animation style for that Spider-Man series, oh, it's going to be so good. The animation style on the show looks like it was ripped straight from a comic book, except there was like a little retro, like futuristic twist on it. It's hard to describe. It looks so good. If they do that for a Spider-Man series, oh, I'm here for it. I know I've been campaigning for Spider-Man 98 to get revived, and so I say we bring that back, bring back the Fantastic Four show from the 90s, bring back the Incredible Hulk, bring back Iron Man. Heck, what if they did like a new Avengers style show in this universe? Like that, just and do like the Fantastic Four and then just do an Avengers show. That would be even better. But overall, I absolutely love this show. If I had to rate it, I'd give it like an 8.5 or a 9. See, I believe it was episode 4 and 6 that I didn't really like, so if those were better, those just felt kind of slow and like sloppy and like filler episodes. But I did watch all 10 of these in not one sitting but in one day, so maybe during those 2 episodes it kind of hit me like a wall, like, hey, I'm watching all of these all at once. I know I said at the beginning of this that I haven't seen a whole lot of X-Men stuff, and I really haven't, other than the few movies that I've seen. I haven't seen all the movies, but the few good movies that I've seen and some of the original series that I watched. But I feel like Danny DeVito in that meme where he's like staring at the camera and he's like, I get it now. Like I'm X-Men pilled. I totally get it now, and I've fallen in love with the characters. Cyclops is by far the standout for me. Him and Rogue. Lastly, if you made it this far into the video of me watching an animated TV series, just want to say thank you so much. Thanks for watching. It means a lot. Please consider subscribing. It just helps me know that you guys like the videos I'm making, and I'll keep making more because of it. If you like the video, like the video. If you dislike the video, dislike the video. Let me know your thoughts on the video and a series below. That's really all I have. Take care.